post-free agency, just crush the draft. It's the only path. Listen, these teams had different approaches in free agency. None of them changed their life in free agency. I know the Patriots effectively got people to take their money. Whether that was effectively spent, I don't know. But it's going to be about for these teams, how well they draft, not just in the first round, but throughout. Next level, it's a reset year. Seahawks just out of nowhere, just like, you know what, let's tear it all down. I'm not saying they're wrong, but it surprised me that they were doing it. The Jets said, Aaron, please go away. We'll take $49 million dead money, sign Justin Fields. We want to start a new culture. The Colts figuring out if they have the quarterback, and the Falcons, after pretending last year they were going to compete with, or thinking they were going to compete with Kirk Cousins, now they're like, okay, Michael Penix, true rookie season. It's a reset year for all of them. Got to earn your $50 million-ish. That's Trevor, that's Kyler, that's Tua.
Yeah.
And because none of these three teams have rosters that can carry mediocre quarterback play. All of these rosters, though, are competent enough, in my opinion. If you get excellent quarterback play, you can really compete. Got to go earn it. Now, Kyler, to be fair, doesn't make quite 50, but you guys understand what I mean. You got to earn that top-of-the-market contract that all three of you guys got. Lowest form of conversation. It's one of my favorite lines from Tony Soprano.
I'm glad we're not on here, but we're actually lower.
Remember when?
Yeah.
Get together with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. Man, this last 5 years, pretty good, isn't it?
What a run.
Jerry Jones walks in the room. He's like, last 5? What? Let me tell you about 30 years ago. The Rooneys walk in the room. They're like, 30? Let me tell you about the 70s. That's when it was really great. All these teams are just coasting off what they once were.
So good.
And none of them are competing for anything this season. The same neighborhood. Listen, Bengals, I know you don't love who's moved in next to you, but this is the neighborhood you live in now, through your own doing. Stop mowing the lawn, didn't take care of the roof, and all of a sudden, it's like, what the hell? We're with the Raiders and Bo Nix, you are. But Joe Burrow lives here, he does. He's a beautiful Lambo in the driveway, but the gutters are falling off the house because nobody pays for anything around there. And the Raiders, shout out to you for getting into this neighborhood. Trade for Geno Smith, all of a sudden you're making moves. And shout out to the Broncos. I do like what the Broncos did defensively in free agency. I think when Afanga's healthy, he's awesome. And Dre Greenlaw, I worry about his ability. Both those guys, I worry about their ability to stay healthy. But if you get healthy versions of Greenlaw and Afanga, those are excellent up the middle of your defensive players. Where can the quarterback take us? This is similar to the earn your $50 million tier, but not quite. So you have Herbert, Stroud, JJ, Baker, and Caleb. All 5 of these teams expect to be in the playoffs next year. All 5 of these teams expect to be able to win a playoff game next year. All 5 of these teams have quarterbacks that they have either invested in via draft pick or via contract, or in the Vikings case, via eschewing Sam Darnold. And the question is, have we made the right decision there? I don't think there's really a question to make the right decision in Houston. You guys understand. But that's where they're at. Their season will hinge on that right now. Better with age, question mark. Commanders, Packers. I don't think either one of these teams, I understand the Commanders got Deebo Samuel. I'm not going to act like these teams didn't do anything in free agency. But their real improvement, I think they are planning on coming from their young players improving. I do like the Commanders adding Laramie Tunsil, so credit to them for that. But mostly it's going to be our young rosters, particularly with Green Bay, getting better, and that's how they are going to get a step better than they were last year in Green Bay's case. Or if the Commanders, for being totally honest, they would be thrilled if they get to the exact same place they were last year. Like back-to-back conference championship losses, sign us up. Make or break year. So here's what I mean. I think this is probably the last hurrah for Stafford McVay as contenders, because I don't know, not because they're necessarily moving on from Stafford after this year. I know they just got something worked out with him, but I don't know if he has many more elite years left. The Lions, you might say, what are you talking about? I don't know if the Lions can emotionally sustain another year where it's like we're going to the Super Bowl without actually getting there. 2 years ago, I don't think they had those expectations going in, but when you have 17-point lead in the conference championship game, you do. Last year, when everyone's hanging point differential banners and talking about they're the new standard in the NFL, to then lose your first playoff game, tough. I really like these two teams as far as respect them, but I have one question. How'd you get better? How'd you get better?
Yeah, DeAndre Hopkins.
How'd you get better? You got Joey Bosa to replace Von Miller. You got one injured aging pass rusher to replace another one. I understand both of these. They're not incredibly young teams, so it's not like the Packers. You didn't spend a bunch in free agency. You're not going to have this surplus of draft picks. I understand folks like to pretend you have been the two best teams, just gotten incredibly unlucky every single year against the same team in the playoffs. But how'd you get better? Zero obvious weaknesses. So listen, it's not the top of the tiers, but it is true. There is not a place on the Chiefs right now you can look at and be like, oh, that's going to be their Achilles heel. I do like the fact that they got the player a lot of people are calling Trent Williams 2.0. I'm just telling you, it's what a lot of people are saying, on a good contract, and that they go into this draft because they have zero obvious weaknesses with the ability to just simply take best player available, not like, gosh darn it, we have to draft the tackle even if he's the 60th player on our board. The champs, but weakened. So they are the champs, and they draft really well, and they have a great GM, and I was wrong for questioning him last offseason. But the tax of being the champs is you lose some guys and you lose some potentially important guys. And so I don't look at them as the same exact team that won the Super Bowl. I look at them as the bones of that team with some of those other pieces gone, but they're still the champs. They didn't lose anyone, even with respect to Milt Williams, so substantial that you would drop them down. So they are the champs, but to me a little weakened from where they were last year. There are the
Okay. All right. Let's jump right into this. My mind's a little all over the place. I just had to rip off like the biggest tick off my dog that I've ever seen, and I'm like, I gotta search this. What the heck was that? But as soon as I saw that he was doing this, I'm like, all right, I gotta record this. My dog's fine right now. I'll look at that later. But there's a few things that really stand out. I mean, to really kind of go through the nitty gritty of like each individual team, like the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. It's like, you give me a break right now. But there's a few things that really stand out to me more than anything, and I'm trying to look at this more as a complete picture rather than like level to level to level. And so I'll start with the first thing that stood out to me was the Falcons. I think the Falcons are actually going to be significantly better than people are anticipating. I was wildly impressed with Penix. I really, really was. And I just think that there's going to be a lot of fight there. If I'm going to be looking at some of these other teams and you're just going to name all these teams and put them above them, I feel more comfortable with the Falcons than I do with, say, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, the Jags. I mean, the Jags are interesting because, again, the coaching move that they made, but who... And I think Trevor Lawrence will be a lot better of a quarterback, but can the dude stay healthy? Who really knows? I know people love the Buccaneers and everyone's all on the Baker Mayfield train. I'm not saying that Baker Mayfield is bad. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are trash. I think it's going to be fun to watch the Bucs and the Falcons actually legitimately compete for the division, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's so much more juice there with the Falcons than people are giving credit for. And then the other thing that stood out to me big time was the Broncos. The Broncos are being woefully underappreciated. Again, I'm also not putting the Buccaneers ahead of the Broncos. At this point, I'm not even putting like a team like the Texans above the Broncos. I think there's going to be a lot of continuity. You also want to talk about better with age. It's the same thing with Bo Nix. As well. Bo Nix is going to evolve. They're really putting a lot of money into that defense. They had some great offensive pickups as well. And then again, and this is where it's tough because this is post free agency tier, and so we obviously know that there's a draft and all of that, which I'm fine with that. I'm ready to play that game and understand that we still have the entire draft. But if I'm looking at teams right now, like that's the way how I kind of want to really look at this. These are not predictions. of necessarily what do I think this will look like in September, October. Like if we just look at the teams right now, and they have to play right now. Right now. I can't be any more clear than that. It's the teams that are the way how these are playing right now. Like I'm not going to put like even like a team like the Minnesota Vikings ahead of the Broncos. Yes, I think the Vikings are growing in a better team, but then you're talking about JJ McCarthy day one. You know, he's essentially a rookie quarterback, 22 years old. That is a lot that they are going to be asking him to do. And again, I think that roster will be great, but like again, we got to wait a little bit. I want to see what they also do with the draft. Is it going to be Aaron Rodgers or is it going to be JJ McCarthy? I don't really know. And again, you guys all know that I'm super high on the Vikings and had them being a legitimate contender last year. So this isn't me trying to pull down the Vikings at all, but it's just like there are legitimate question marks around this team right now because they haven't even shot down the Aaron Rodgers talk, which is what you know that they are legitimately considering it, which means that they are legitimately kind of like, what are we doing with JJ? Like it is a real conversation as much as Vikings fans want to deny it. So it's a real thing. They were trying to work out a deal with Sam Darnold, and people say no, they were doing it just to help him get a better deal somewhere else. And it's like, really, are they trying to help Aaron Rodgers get a better deal too? Because they easily could have said, we're not interested in Aaron. No, thank you. We're moving on from JJ. They did not do that. Okay, so that's a very real thing. I agree to an extent in terms of like how'd you get better. I made a Bills and a Ravens video as well, talking about how like it's not so clear to me that if they're making the right moves to finally like take it to the next step. I mean, like I think they've improved, but like not in a way where you're like, that's a difference maker. I don't look at the Bills and say, oh, that's a difference between beating the Chiefs and not beating the Chiefs. And same thing with the Ravens. And I got in a fight with someone in the comment section where they're like, oh, the Ravens, DeAndre Hopkins, you know, this and that and touchdowns. And I'm like, dude, the guy in the last like 5 games, including the playoffs with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid had 1 touchdown that was in the Super Bowl, and it was garbage time. You know, it was nothing, you know, so essentially 0 touchdowns, and especially in big, important moments in the games. So this idea that DeAndre Hopkins now is going to be the difference between scoring touchdowns and field goals is kind of absurd, quite frankly. So I reject that. Again, do I think that these teams got better? Yes, but it's like I'm looking to the Ravens and the Bills to be like, what are those moves that you made, man? Like, what did you do to truly finally be like, we are the teams, right? Like, what is that acquisition? What are you doing? The problem is that so much of it also falls on the coaching, which I just, you know, continue to struggle with for both those teams. The 0 obvious weaknesses from the Kansas City Chiefs, I just, if you think that this team, the way how it's constructed right now, if they were to run it back and now play, now they also lost even DeAndre Hopkins, but technically they have Hollywood Brown, so now he would be healthy in this iteration. But Rashee Rice is most likely going to be suspended. Xavier Worthy, there's still a real chance. I'm not getting into the whole, all the stuff, you know, did he, didn't he, but it's still an actual ongoing investigation. The woman involved is getting a lawyer. I mean, we just don't know. He could be suspended. Like, we just don't know. We have no, but even if they were both playing, you know, to say that they have 0 obvious weaknesses, I just think is kind of absurd, because you're not going to tell me that this O-line now is just, you know, perfect and great, and now it's all great and dandy. That defense, I think, was obviously a great defense, but I'm just not so confident that, again, if you run it back with the Bills and the Ravens, that it's just like guarantee, quite frankly. And considering the moves that the Broncos made, I would say that considering what both those teams look like constructed as, you know, as constructed, I would say, like, you know, if you want to kind of play this whole game of like, well, who got better? It's like, well, then I'm going to put it on the Broncos, and then the Broncos win that game where they had the blocked field goal, and now they go 2-0 against the Chiefs. And then same thing with the Chargers. I think the way how the Chargers got better, you would say, okay, well, we could give them at least a win or 2 as well. So it's like, by definition, then the Chiefs are going to slip a little bit just from being this, you know, undeniable 1 seed to potentially the 2 seed, the 3 seed, whatever it may be, which now that also kind of changes everything. But I do think it's fair to put them above the other teams for sure. I think it's fair to have, you know, the Eagles and the Chiefs, but to say 0 obvious weaknesses is just kind of absurd. The champs but weakened, and the other team is 0 obvious weaknesses. Like, I just, I struggle with the tagline or the title or whatever the heck it's considered. Same thing with the Eagles. You know, this whole the champs but weakened. I think John Middlecoff actually did a great job of summarizing it, and my video came out before his a couple days ago, but I think the way he phrased it was really good when he was talking about the Eagles and the Eagles moving on, and that, you know, I emphasize coaching so much, right? And to the point where some people get annoyed by it because I'm such a huge believer in coaching. And some of the decisions that the Eagles are making, they're making because they have the trust in their coaching, especially defensively and Fangio. And that when you have an awesome coach, you can find other talent. You can develop young draft picks, as well as find other diamonds in the rough that you can now, you know, sculpt and do and make them players how you need them to be. That is the benefit of coaching. You're not as reliant on just the bodies themselves. And it's like, you know, it's so funny because there really is kind of a battle between players and coaches in that regard. We even have the cheesy thing where it's like, who cares about the X's and O's? I just care about the Jims and Joes, or whatever the heck the saying is. And it's just like, you know, you even had Aiden Hutchinson talk about like, oh, it doesn't really matter what the scheme is, and anyone can coach us. And it's like, okay, sure, bro, whatever you say. And you know, some players really believe and understand the importance of coaching and others don't. Patrick Mahomes himself, when they said, how long can this go? And he says, it'll go as long as Andy Reid is here. That's what he said, right? He's like, this, we will keep this party going as long as Andy Reid is here. So he seems to value the importance of coaching. Tom Brady seems to value the importance of coaching. You know, so it's like, it's not so much that they're weakened. I would say the champs, but different. To me, that's a better word for it. You know, it's just different, and it's kind of a wait and see type thing. No one knew that the Eagles were going to be able to draft Cooper DeJean and Mitchell and turn them into studs. But again, in terms of kind of just doing this where we're just looking at post free agency and not trying to factor in what things will look like in the draft, that's, you know, I think it's fair just to not try to assume too much of what the Eagles will be able to do. But the Eagles are different from all these other teams in the sense where the draft and some of the draft picks that they get are going to be more important for them to kind of keep this going than any of these other teams necessarily, just because of the situation that the Eagles are in, from just money and obviously in terms of having to lose, you know, other players to bigger deals, losing players to other bigger deals. But yeah, and then the other part that I wanted to look at was now also the Rams, the Lions, the Commanders, and the Packers. This whole better with age, you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to see that with the Packers. I was really disappointed in what the Packers did this season. I was, you know, they just felt that they were just not ready to play more often than not. And maybe you can say that that's an age thing, but I was very unhappy with how that season went. And I've defended it and I've unpacked it. But I'm just not going to say it's going to be better with age. It'll be better with better coaching, with better game plans, and more maturity, which I guess is technically age, but maturity with Jordan Love. And I'm expecting to already see that maturity out of Jordan Love. And I'm a big Jordan Love fan. So the Packers, actually more than any other team right now, is actually more, I just kind of have them on the side and just be like, they're a wait and see team for me. I got a question mark alongside, and I want to see. I just don't want to see the same style offense that Matt LaFleur ran with Jordan Love. I need to see an evolution of that offense. I need to see an evolution of Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur's relationship, both on and off the field. I need to see Matt LaFleur mature and evolve as a head coach as well. So to me, that's kind of more what I want to see. I don't think that they're just expecting the Commanders to be better, you know, because he said, oh, the Commanders are relying on just, you know, essentially Jane Daniels just being better than he was last year because of you know, getting older. And I'm like, I don't see that to be the case at all. Again, I kind of take issue with the better with age type of situation. Do I think Jane Daniels will continue to grow and evolve? Yes, but this team needs to just get better as a whole. The defense, you know, to me, the question is if you want to put like a little tagline on them, it's really just kind of like, you know, at this point, this team will go as far as their defense allows them. Because to me, that's the next step. that needs to happen. When Dan Quinn can really do what he wants to do offensively and get this defense, or excuse me, when Dan Quinn can do what he wants to do defensively and get this team to a top 10, top 5 defense, which is what he's done with, especially most recently the Cowboys, when he can do that, I mean, that's when this team can really hit the ground running, because we already know what Jaden Daniels can do. We already know what he can do when his back's up against the wall, when you need him go for it on 4th down after 4th down after 4th down, when you need him to step up in the 4th quarter, et cetera, et cetera. Now actually just give him the lead. Give him the lead in the 4th quarter, and now he just has to manage the game and be smart and strategic and, simplified. It's just like, that to me is how you're going to win these games, because you had both the Commanders and the Chiefs really relying on a lot of these close wins, come from behind wins, last second wins, et cetera, and then you run into a complete team like the Philadelphia Eagles and they both get rocked. It's a perfect example right there. And so, which then takes me to the Rams and the Lions, where, make or break year. I do think, obviously, I actually just said this recently when I was having a conversation with someone about the Rams. Like, I do think that the Rams are the biggest threat in the NFC, even over the Lions, because of Stafford and McVay more than anything. And I love what they're doing both offensively and defensively. But there's just like that absolute trust in Stafford and McVay. I don't have that with the Lions right now, because we cannot act like Ben Johnson is this awesome, amazing coordinator, and that they lose him and that offense is just not going to skip a beat. I just don't see how that's fundamentally possible. I have to imagine that even Jared Goff himself is going to backtrack slightly. Again, I'm not acting like that this Lions team is going to completely crumble, but to think that it's not going to even just decrease by 5% is just, I just think it's kind of absurd. I really do. So I think it's fair to have like legit question marks around the Lions, and not to mention, even if they are really good and competitive, what does this look like in the playoffs now? Because now, again, you're losing coordinators who now also have like really concrete depth of experience calling plays at a high level. And we saw even Ben Johnson, I don't think Ben Johnson called a great game against the Commanders, quite frankly. I know the defense was wrecked and all of that, but like, even Tom Brady kind of called him out and was kind of like, I don't really know what you're doing here, bud. And I think that's fair criticism. That is, coaches have to learn and grow, evolve as well. So I'm going to have to imagine that there's going to be some of those pains with the Lions that I just don't think that the Rams would necessarily have. But I do think that the Rams, with Matthew Stafford specifically, is a short runway, of course. I kept saying this all last season. Someone like Stafford is so difficult to evaluate, because I think he truly is a special and elite quarterback, and quite frankly is better than most people really seem to understand, because of how many years were wasted in Detroit. But the problem is that he is older, and so he's obviously not going to be able to be as elite as he once was, as consistently as he once was able to do. So you just don't always necessarily know what you're going to get with the Stafford. His peaks, I'll take his peaks up against, with anyone, quite frankly. But in terms of his consistency and, him more easily going to be able to get banged up and will he be able to bounce back? Like, he's an older guy and he's married and has like 19 children, man. So it's just like he's going to be running on fumes more. He's not going to be aging like a Tom Brady. And so to me, that becomes impossible to predict, because like I said, but I got distracted for a second. I was getting a conversation with someone about the Rams. They were like, oh, the Eagles have talent leaving and the Rams have talent coming in. And it's like, they're pretty much trying to say like, oh, the Eagles' reign is done and the Rams are just beginning. And it's like, if your quarterback was 25, 26, 27, I could agree with that to a degree, but like, you're going to have to probably get a new quarterback within the next couple of years. And let's not act like that's just the easiest thing to do, because it's just not. So no matter how great your roster is, like, if you have to now start over with a rookie quarterback, a second-year quarterback, or now you're going to have to try to find like another older, like maybe at this point, like Dak Prescott or someone is available, like then you're going to take like a 36-year-old, 35-year-old, like, you know what I mean? Or like a 34, 35-year-old version of the Geno Smith this season in whoever that is in a couple of years. Like, okay, you think that's going to lead you to the promised land? Like, I'm not so sure about it. So I do think arguably this will be the best year for the Rams to win this year or next year. Again, this is so dependent on how Stafford ages this year and next year more than anything. So I do get it. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the worst thing. Like I said, I'm not really gonna get too lost in it where it's like, oh, the Chargers and the Texans, they're on the same tier. Like I'm just, it's just not as important to me. I think it's more interesting to kind of just pick out kind of some of these specific teams, rather than try to like, get too hung up on where they're necessarily at, or like which tier they're grouped together with, quite frankly. But like I said, because I'm also trying to do this in can't think of the word that I'm looking for. Still thinking about my dog and that tick. But in the spirit of saying, okay, this is just post free agency. I'm not trying to anticipate what moves are going to be done in in the draft, etc., etc. But it's also hard not to. So it's like I'm kind of have a split experience here. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Nick's post free agency tiers? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I absolutely love to see you part of it. I'm going to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.